All right, folks, let's get started. Thank you all very much for your patience. Thanks for joining us. My name is Hamed with Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, and happy to be welcoming you all to our weekly webinar. This is webinar part 39 for this year in our Know Your Fight, Building Power, Not Paranoia series. This the webinar series we started back as COVID hit, and in the interest of keeping the conversations going, keeping our organizing going, building collective knowledge, building power. So we switched to this digital form of conversation, not to the best, of our liking, but under the circumstances, I guess this is the best what we can do. But today's webinar is super special. This is also, closing out 2020, a year that brought all of us a whole lot of amazing challenges, but along with that, a lot of opportunities. But what we saw was one of the largest social movements in the history of this country, and we would call it a global social movement against state violence, against racism, against police violence. We also saw intense, impact on the communities as a result of a global pandemic, which up until now has hit over 70 plus million people, and taken, just hundreds and thousands, and just in the United States, over a million lives. So a lot of stuff has happened. So today, I want to welcome our comrades, the fellow organizers, community members who've really been on the front lines on many different levels. Folks at the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, both as an organization and many of us on a personal level, have been building with as a part of our larger, family. We have Pastor Cue JnMarie, who all I can say is probably one of the most incredible organizer. I mean, an inspiration for all of us. Always in the trenches, always on the front lines, with the clergy and laity and economic justice and CLU LA, and also Church Without Walls in Skid Row. We also have Professor Bita Amani, who has been such an inspiration and a guide for us. Has been a part of these conversations earlier on and during the year as well around COVID. Professor Amani is a professor of public health at Charles Drew University. Is also an epidemiologist and also co-chair of the task force, COVID-19 task force on racism and equity. Along with us, we also have General Dogon. General Dogon, if you don't know General Dogon, then you better get to know General Dogon. General Dogon is exactly who is a general, is a brother and a comrade, has been an organizer in Skid Row for the last 15 years, so happy to have him with us. And then we have our comrades and organizers who've been putting up this amazing fight, just almost like, having been in those moments a couple times, it's almost like what was phenomenal to see this almost was this hand-to-hand combat going head to head with the state, and and defending and protecting the fight in El Sereno, and reclaiming land and reclaiming property, and really calling out and exposing state violence. So we'll be speaking to them as well. We want to make this, this is being recorded. We want to make this an interactive conversation. We'll get started with starting with comments from our the folks who we invited, but a couple logistical things. We are being recorded. Also, for folks who are joining in, you would see your mic muted. But please send us, raise your hands, or send a message in the chat, because we've been Zoom bombed. So we're not trying to police people's participation, but just trying to be careful and making sure that we maintain the integrity of the space. The chat is also available as to send out messages as well. So yeah. So just let us get started, and maybe just each one of you or folks can take a few minutes just to talk about, just how do you see 2020 rolling out? How do you see it from your vantage point as movement builders, as organizers, as frontline fighters? So maybe we'll start with our comrade, Pastor Q. So let's roll.
Well, how do we see 2020 rolling out? I think we're at the end of that one, right? So if you mean 2021, then
or 2020 in our rearview mirror.
right. Review. Obviously, you've stated it, and you've stated it well, that from my perspective, right, from a clergy perspective, I tell people all the time that what happened in 2020 as it relates to, let's say, the Black Lives Matter movement becoming the largest movement for social justice in the history of the world. BLM had been organizing since 2013, been part of that movement for 2013. I believe that we were organizing, and we were going to keep organizing on the ground. And I believe what happened to George Floyd, as tragic as that was, I believe our Creator used that, says, okay, well, if y'all gonna do this, what I'm gonna use this as an opportunity to propel this movement to over 70 countries in the world, right? So I think from a broader perspective, we see that work. And then of course, the work of housing, right? When I believe COVID was one of those things, again, speaking from a spiritual perspective, is one of those things that actually brought to light the real issues of houselessness in this state and across the nation, and also this issue of income inequality, right? And then it brings to, and you can't have that without actually seeing how state-sanctioned violence is used as if it is some sort of remedy to remedy the situations that we're dealing with. So just a brief synopsis of my views of 2020. You're muted, I think.
Well, of course, I mean, you won't be having a Zoom conversation without at least being muted and not knowing that. So maybe that's an indication of Zoomitis. We're all going to start suffering, as we pass through this thing. But thank you, Pastor Q, for that sense, and we'll definitely follow up with more conversations as well. Next, I'm just going to ask our friends from Reclaimers. I think we have Sasha and Chris on the line here to see if please go ahead and you can unmute yourself. Whoever wants to go first, just as your own sense as to how did you see this play out as you look at that rearview mirror. So about 2020. Whoever wants to go.
Adelante, Sasha. You can go. Or if you'd like, I could go.
Okay, thank you. So I just definitely this year, we've seen not just this year, but in general, as social media breaks out, we're more clear to see everything that's been going on. It's not that it's new, it's just that it's more visible. And that being said, I know that especially being under the spotlight, I just feel like people with their badge are just taking more control and taking issues into a more drastic way, and which is ironic because here we're asking them to find a better solution, and instead of finding a better solution, they're just getting, I think, aggravated and not. I have a couple clients who are actual sheriffs, and one of them, he runs an academy, and I hear them talking all the time about how upset they are about defunding. And one of the conversations that has never been brought up is, well, how come you haven't changed your training so that way people won't kind of come against you as the way we are. Clearly the masses are speaking. So clearly change needs to be made. However, no one wants to speak on that subject. And that's just, for me, that's very frustrating.
Chris, would you like to add to that?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for this space. I think what's important to also recognize is how the situation has been compounded, how the situation's getting worse every day, and how the need for our organizing to really expand and build across communities that are resisting this type of repression and looking for solutions. Um, those that would be my analysis at this moment, is that there's like an urgent need for us to start building across, continue to build, because it's happening, right? But just more so, like, I feel like our focus needs to be on um, having more of these spaces to reflect, especially during this time, and also getting to know each other's struggles with just across LA, not to mention nationwide, and um, yeah, just prepare ourselves more and more,
Mhm. Thank
moving
you.
into the next, Gregorian calendar year. But just, yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Um, General Dogon, where'd you go? Let's go with that as to how do you see the year 2020 as we are wrapping it up?
It's gonna be the year of the dragon. 2021 is gonna be the year of the dragon, and what I mean by that is that it's gonna be the year when POFOS is really gonna have to stand up and fight back. I mean, when you look at the situations of going into 2020 and going into 21, I see a mass rebellion in this. We already the way houses people is being attacked. It's already going down. They're already attacking them. There's almost going to be over hundreds of thousand evictions that's going to be coming the end of January, February, right? Flooding the streets, right? And then once again, the city's only response is criminalization.
Mm-hmm.
So, folks, it's going to be forced in the corner. Folks are going to be forced in a position to where we got to fight back. So now is the time for us to start planning for that, going into that. So that's the way I see it. I see 2021 is going to be a year. It's going to be the linchpin for the revolution. I hope so.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Professor Amani, so moving on to you, how do you see that? And while we're at it, so let's start, just moving us, and then we can just kind of come around and have this conversation that how do you see 2020? And then take some time to talk about where we are with the COVID situation and how do you see that unfolding as we move into the New Year's as well, and along with its impact.
Well, I want to, before I forget, because it's really important, I wanted to say thank you to the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition for, thinking about, ways that we can all stay connected and to come from, many different front lines, as you said, so that we can, push this conversation in the direction that we want, because we know that there are things that we have to think about across many different systems in order to be able to get to the place that we want to get. When I was just sitting and listening to the other speakers, the other panelists talk about the moments of 2020 that really stood out to them, with the fact that, as we've said, the biggest protest in history, right? So much of a centering of the conversation on structural racism, for example, in public health, right, would not have happened without that protest occurring, which was very good for public health, right? If I'm just reflecting on public health in 2020 for a second. But it also then created a set of conditions where both in public health and across all the other sectors and systems, we're seeing the strong impulse to just do reform work right now. And so to not do anything that's like transformative, not anything that's like in an abolition vision of like reimagining, you know, all the solutions that keep being brought, you know, to the forefront, that's evidence-based, right? Produced from this data that's gathered in these ways that make us all feel very insecure, right? Because we know that how data at any moment can be weaponized, right? All these reforms that are being generated from this data that's being collected, we can also see how, while we've had so much movement, there's such a strong train coming at us, right? With a huge momentum to push this energy into these solutions that are never really going to change the set of conditions that we have all been protesting against. You know, it's from a public health perspective, it's been an exciting year to see people appreciate, right? That whole idea of racism being foundational to all the things that we're saying are falling apart, right, in society. But at the same time, it has not done anything in terms of preventing Black, Latinx, and Indigenous people from dying from COVID or being like the highest likely to be like hospitalized. And so then we continue to have these fights within public health to push people to think about things that are more structural, that are more about the roots, and that are in alignment with community demands for how they also not only need to like fight what is there, but also to maintain power. And so, you know, this is kind of how I have seen, you know, 2020. And so then, but again, getting to your other question about where we're at with COVID, I think, you know, the vaccine conversation for me continues to be like the most important indicator of how it's business as usual, right? The fact that so much of the energy and focus is once again on like technological pharmaceutical solutions to a problem that we know would overnight be fixed with like, you know, universal access to quality and dignified housing, healthcare, education, you know, transportation, food systems, right? You know, we know that these are the things that would have prevented this pandemic in the first place. And we know that these are the things that, if having been in place, would have meant that this whole 2020 would have looked very different. And so then the vaccine conversation continues to be the place where we have to look to and to push back and say, you want to keep us alive for what, right? Like ultimately, like, what experience are we going to be having if your vaccine works in terms of preventing us from dying, right? Like what is that world that you want us to live in? And I think that, you know, that's, you know, that will continue to be really important, and we'll need to, you know, keep pushing back, not only in talking about the history of race, racism, white supremacy, you know, settler colonialism, racial capitalism, all these histories, we'll need to keep talking about them, how science, medicine, and public health played a central role in their institutionalization and the power that they've maintained. We'll have to keep doing that, but then we also then have to push for something that isn't, once again, these reforms that we're seeing, and getting to the larger, I think, question in public health and COVID, which is that if we're going to be using these tools of surveillance, of medicine, right? If we're going to be using these tools, what are we using these tools for? Are we on the same page that we want healthcare, medicine, public health, all these things, so that we can be in our best fighting form for liberation? Then that is the message that we have to push back into the kind of the public health world, because that's the part that they're missing, right? The whole debate right now is, what have we done? How can we rectify it? But the idea is, what do we know and how can we use it to get us someplace that's more in alignment with what all the fighting and struggling that the panelists are talking about.
Thank you. And I do want to come back about the issue of contact tracing, Professor Amani, but thank you for kind of just lifting that. So building upon that, Pastor Cue, you know, more recently, I mean, over the last few years, even since we're on the subject of health and healthcare too, that the American Public Health Association had declared a few years ago police violence and racism as a public health crisis. And more recently, the American Medical Association, the Doctor Association, and all have also come out as looking at it as police violence and racism as a public health crisis. So now it's not just, I mean, the purveyors or the participants of the whole medical industrial complex are also kind of speaking out in different ways as to how. So, obviously, just in 2020, we saw the ground shift. We saw, and particularly, at least on a personal level, what was really heartening was that how many youth were out on the streets and just really, really with that whole revolutionary spirit. And the language was very simple. What we heard from the folks, like this movement building, was that, I'm not going to get into like what the intellectual frameworks are, but this system is effed up. This ain't acceptable, right? But yet at the same time, the system by itself is an autopilot, so it sets to reset and retools itself. So in a sense, how much longer are we going to even accept this language or reform? And what are we looking at?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that I think abolitionist frames it well, but I think that autopilot that you talk about is very important to explore, right? We know, Amid, you and I had these conversations regarding the 1968, LBJ Kerner Commission report, right? 120 social scientists, and not the most progressive ones, because the most progressive one did not want to be part of that commission, or because they were against the Vietnam War, right? But they came back and said that as it relates to the ghetto, because they were responding to the more than 163 uprisings that we had in 1967. And they were like, well, what is the cause? And we could have told them the cause, and they knew the cause, right? But they wanted to explore it, looking for the data, right? Someone just talked about data and how they weaponize the data. So they wanted to find the data. They could have came to anybody in the hood and we would have told them what the problem was, right? But they wanted to find their own solution, their own, they wanted to find it on their own. So one of the things they said, though, which is important to frame our conversation, is that white society is deeply implicated in the ghetto, right? White institutions created it, white institutions maintain it, and white society condones it, right? So when we think about that from the framework of everything, the institutions that we're dealing with, they're Eurocentric institutions. So every solution that they're going to give us is going to come from a European perspective. It's not going to come from indigenous people's perspective. It's not going to come from a tribal perspective, right? It's not going to come from a village perspective. Like they say, no one knows which village in Africa this phrase comes from, but they say it takes a village to raise a child, right? But they're not going to come from a village perspective. That's not how they operate. They're going to come from a different paradigm, and the paradigm we've been living with all these time is the paradigm of a Euro-American perspective. So they're always going to come back to, let us reform the system. In 68, they said, let's reform the system. In 68, they said what the police need is training. You can't train racism out of people. How do you do that? And so the reason we have come to this place where folks are saying defund is not because we haven't tried to reform. We've attempted to reform, but folks are saying defund because they realize, reforming always leads to more trauma for people of color. Right? It always leads to more trauma. It's always, like you said, Ahmed, the system is always reinventing itself. But someone said, I heard someone say, in order to make the old model obsolete, you've got to create a new model that makes the old model obsolete. So we've got to create an appetite for abolition. You feel me?
I like that. Absolutely. And can I quote you on that?
Indeed.
Absolutely, the appetite, because that's exactly where we need to go. So, so building on that, Sasha, Chris, and other reclaimers as well, please feel free to chime in. One of the things that Pastor Q raised about the solutions are with the indigenous communities. The solutions are with the village. The solutions are are locally right there. But here we are, I mean, and hundreds of homes that the state has owned for years now. They're sitting vacant, and I just also want to honor Pastor Q's engagement in that as well, because I remember back in March and April, Pastor Q, you were also there, very much on the front lines of that too. This fight in El Sereno. So going back to the reclaimers, that what has been, I mean, the response basically just comes down to policing their way out of problems. The response comes down to state violence and the heavy-handedness. And so, what are the communities, the indigenous, the local community, the residents of the neighborhoods, and folks who are super concerned that this is state property, which in principle, as so-called in the democracy, belongs to the people because it has been developed out of out of those resources. So, talk about that. What has been the conversation within the communities?
Well, we were out.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Pastor Key, if you want to wrap that comment. I was going to go to the reclaimers, but go ahead. Maybe go back to you.
No, go ahead. Let it go to them. Go to them because I just spoke.
Okay.
And we can come back. Yeah.
Sorry, Hamid, can you repeat the question again?
So what have been the conversations in the local community itself, and folks who are concerned as to where that what are the challenges that continue to face people where the state continues to hoard these homes which could be made available?
Not sure if any of the reclaimers want to answer that, but I can give a brief, I guess, like opinion or idea of like the conversation.
Sure. However, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think, like on the night of the action and what followed, that I noticed was, there was a strong opposition within the community, and that doesn't reflect all of the neighbors, of course, but I think that there were a few neighbors that have. And this is true for a lot of people, I think. Capitalism is so heavily internalized, and this culture of individualism. There were people yelling, there were neighbors threatening and assaulting some of the reclaimers. So I think that, like this, there is opposition, and I think that's because the system has done such a good job at censoring itself, so that it seems like we need the system to survive. I think that the state, has asserted itself as an authority figure. And, to go back to that other question, like where does this lead us into the next year? I think that we need to push for more consent within our communities, recognizing that we are on stolen land, recognizing the fact that this state has never, it was never consentful, and it's never going to be consentful. That's true for the Native people on whose lands we're on. That's also true for our Black relatives that were stolen from their communities. And so, yeah, definitely centering abolition in our care work, and continuing to do the mutual aid that is needed for many people to survive.
So just building on that, just maybe to reframe the question a little bit over here as well, that generally what has been the state's response? I mean, in a sense, where folks are demanding that, look, we're looking at record homelessness, we're looking at expanding homelessness, we're looking at expanding unemployment. With the governor and some of the other folks and the local politicians and council members, what has been their response from your vantage point?
Oh, I see. Yeah, there have been vouchers offered, but I think that it's so bureaucratic, and the process. Anyone who has faced or tried to seek rent control, some sort of, like, what is it called, affordable housing, will know how long the wait list is, right? And it's it's a game that the rich play that the poor can't afford to lose. And so the state is going to respond the way it has always responded. Our health isn't a priority, right? They're here to protect their property and their enterprise. And so that's the reason why the night of the action, it was only a matter of hours before the reclaimers were evicted, right, from their homes. And it's yeah, it's always upsetting to recognize and see how the state will be ferocious in its protection of its property, which is stolen. But when it comes to the livelihood of our communities, they don't they're okay playing the waiting game because they're not the ones that are going to be affected by it.
And can you give us a quick snapshot of how many homes are we speaking about that are vacant?
If I have my numbers correctly, I think it's 400 homes throughout
Whoa.
California.
Wow. And at this stage of pandemic and this
Throughout-
massive,
Sorry.
go ahead, Chris.
Just within the Caltrans 710 corridor.
Hmm.
So that includes El Sereno, South Pasadena, and Pasadena. About 400 homes.
Whoa. So this is just local in LA County. When we have,
Yes.
when the numbers are, and I'm going to go to Dogon with that as well, because the numbers are about 4 unhoused people are dying a day. Those are the numbers. So Dogon, how about that? How do we see this? I mean, how do you connect these fights with, what's going on, that you have vacant homes? And on the other hand, I mean, we have four people a day dying. And from Measure H to HHH to everything else, we've had billions of dollars that has been imposed as a tax. And here we are today, that we had record number of level of unhoused folks.
So yeah, so it's crazy. So I started working at LA Can in 2005, and 2005 all the way up to right now, I would say the majority of my agenda that I've been working with has been trying to talk or convince the city, politicians, particularly council members and stuff like that, that the motions and the ideas they got are all bad ideas, right? I remember back when the city first allowed people to sleep on the streets in Jones versus the city of Los Angeles, 2005, it was a case, right, where the city was found guilty in a federal court, right, of violating, human and civil rights. And so the federal courts told the city to make amends. And the amends was, until they found housing for everybody, they would allow people to sleep on the streets. And this was in 2005. And they would allow, the federal courts told them this order was stand until you build 1,200 units of housing for poor people. This was in 2005. And so the city's response right then, if you was a politician, if you work in the city, or if you was the mayor, you would say, okay, we just got dinged in federal court for not having housing for people, for everybody, right? So the time now, I looked on Skid Row at the time, it was a little less than 150 tents on the streets. The time right now was the time for city to invest in housing. They had the perfect time right there to invest in housing, right? What did they do? They turn around and they invest in a criminalization. Just months later, they launched the Safer Cities Initiative, which brought 110 extra police to Skid Row. And it was all about criminalizing people. They plan was to remove people. You know what I'm saying? And from 2005, I created a timeline, not for this meeting, but for a community watch training that I did months ago. I don't know if people can see it, the timeline, but it's right here. It's so long that it's longer than what my house is. Let me see if people can people see it?
It's a little bit faded, but yeah. But if you can just give us a quick snapshot of what it says, that'll be great. Yeah,
all the way. So I'm just trying to show it goes all the way from 2005 to 2020, where we are now, right? And I wrote a lot of this off my calendar, right? My calendar, since I've been working at LA Care, and it's nonstop criminalization from 2005 all the way to 2012. And it talks about everything that happened during all these timelines. Right? I don't want to get into it because it's a whole lot of criminalization, a whole lot of shit. Right? We had 3 rapporteurs from the United Nations that come through Skid Row, LA Can. We filed all kind of complaints with the federal government. We filed community complaints. We took it to the streets. We did protests. We did marches. We did everything that you could think of, right? And so, I mean, for the last 15 years, the city has just, you know, been bent on criminalizing people right here today in the face of COVID-19. You know, Sammy, they just passed the motion the other day, last week, is to continue the sweeps. You know, right when the Surgeon General and everybody telling people to leave people alone, leave people where they at, you know, move folks. You know, the city just continues to be bent on criminalizing folks. And so where I see it going in that is they just can't stop, right? And so when next month, the end of next month, when all these evictions come down and people gonna be forced to be in the streets, I mean, everything that's vacant, you know what I mean, it's gonna be opening. You know, people gonna have no choice but to go and just take stuff. Is, you know, it's a fight for genetic survival right now, and we can't put our faith and life in the politicians, the duty bearers, because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. You know, they just released a UCLA vets report, right, that talks about the 2021 budget for the city of Los Angeles, right? And once again, the budget leads the road in criminalization, like it always been leading it since 2005. The 54% of the budget going to the LAPD. You know, just from the general fund, they had another $100 million that was going annually just to police SCI just on Skid Row. That don't include all the other little programs and other kind of shit that they got, you know, and all this. They spent in the last 10 years on Skid Row, they spent over $1 billion just policing Skid Row, you know, and we told them, you know, since 2005, just when you think you can arrest the last person on the block, here come the first one getting out again. So now it's over 5,000 tents on Skid Row. You know, you got homelessness all through the city, public health conditions that has gone to hell. You know what I'm saying? And the city has no excuse for it. They coming out, they blew $1 billion that we had. They supposed to gave us 10,000 units. We only got 3. They gave 40% of that $1 billion for just what they call soft costs, just for them to talk about the project. You know what I mean? And so it's just been a payoff for developers. When you look downtown, they're building housing from First Street all the way to Washington Boulevard. You got a whole new city of condos and lofts. So they are building housing, but they just building housing for a selective group of people. And so the time is now. People is rising up. You know what I mean? And people's getting pissed off and ready to fight back. You know, and so for me, you know what I mean, I think that, you know, coming in 2021, that's why I was saying that it's going to be the year of the dragon, right? Because the city have shown themselves they ain't gonna stop criminalizing. They don't know nothing else to do. If you know, here, yeah, that's it. That's all.
Right.
I'll talk all the way to New Year's about what they're gonna do.
I know. Thank you. Thank you.
Us, what we gonna do? What we gonna do?
Absolutely.
You know, that's what the thing is. We got to focus on what we gonna do and fight back. You know, because they gonna keep doing what they're doing. They ain't stopping. They've been doing this shit since America since 1492. They've been doing this shit. So what are we waiting on? You know what I mean? It's now and never.
Right, absolutely, and we're gonna get to that. So before I go to Professor Amani, Pastor Q, I just wanted to quickly go back because you had some thoughts about what's going on in El Sereno as well. But I also want you to kind of ground that in your work, because you absolutely are there in Skid Row at the Church Without Walls, and you're organizing in Skid Row. So here you're looking at you know, our you know, just communities in mass, like anytime 3,000 to 6,000 folks in a 50-block area, nowhere to go, and then being quarantined through digital redlining almost. And then, you know, you see these, you know, 400 vacant homes, as Chris reminded us, in this just 710 corridor. So how do you then, you know, yeah. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, the solution is simple. Either you tell the rich young ruler to share his riches, or you throw people on the streets, force them to fend for themselves, and you use law enforcement to clean up the problem. So we know it's genocide, right? What we've been doing is, within those structures, the structures of racism are so destructive that it actually places people against each other, right? Marginalized groups have to scrap and claw and fight for the same resources when we have enough resources for everybody. So in El Sereno, when they took the first set of housing in El Sereno, 13 houses, all brown families, and we celebrated that. Matter of fact, I was there praying with families and helping to move them in and actually helping to protect them from law enforcement when they came. But there were no Black families included, right? And so we began Reclaim Black LA, and we're still in the process of organizing because we're about to do some things with Reclaim Black LA. We realized that we had to focus on Black folks, primarily on top of the work that we're doing with brown folks. We gotta definitely focus on marginalized groups that have been left out, and not just Black folks. There are other folks that are being left out. They gotta speak up, and we gotta focus because within the system, if you don't focus on particular groups, the system will eat those people alive. And so that's what the system is doing to Black folks as it relates to housing. Everybody knows the numbers. I don't need to say it. We all know how Black folks are disproportionately affected, and we saw COVID. It started with Black folks, but the system is predictable. As soon as after the Black folks started, you started seeing the numbers with Black folks. Then you started seeing the numbers with brown folks because brown folks continued to go to work, right, and continue to go to work to provide the things that we use for sustenance and the things we use for survival. So Dogon is correct. We are organizing right now, which is what we have to do in order to survive. We are organizing right now with Reclaim Black LA to put people in housing. So that's going down pretty soon. And that's the only thing we can do, right? What other choice do we have? We have to continue to dismantle the system. It's kind of like, and someone brought up something that's really important. The whole idea of even our folks are so engulfed in the system. The system is so ingrained in them that they fight us within the communities, right? And they push back within the communities because they believe the system, if they can make it within the system and the system protects them, then to hell with everybody else. And that's why we have to, that's why abolition is key and not reforming, because when you reform, that's only going to get a few of our people out. And once a few of our people get out of the system, what they do now is they start buying into the system and they become indoctrinated by the system. And so they begin to perform for the system. That's why we had to get rid of people like Jackie Lacey, right? Because at that point, you just have Black people or brown people managing a racist system, but they're not dismantling this. If they're not dismantling the system, they become part of the problem as well.
Thank you. Yeah. So Professor Amani, and what I would like to do is to go to you and then open it up for folks to share their comments and then circle back and come back to, reclaimers and all of you about so what are we, how are we organizing and what's our fight? But before that, we've heard, I mean, in a sense, what we are just hearing is that what, from your a part of work which has been declared as a public health crisis. We're seeing racism, we're seeing homelessness, we're seeing poverty, we're seeing various other forms of state violence. We're seeing how dehumanization is happening. And now, of course, we're bringing in this pandemic into the equation, and then we see the massive surveillance state expanding again through this contact tracing and everything else. So how do you see this unfolding and its impact as both as an academic, as an organizer, as a researcher, as somebody who's on the front lines?
I think, when Pastor Q started talking about like all they're ever going to come up with are going to be Eurocentric, white, right, solutions to the problem. That's, we're in that place in public health right now, where while contact tracing, for example, is a tool, and in some contexts it's a very good tool, right, and it can actually really be effective at reducing like the spread of disease and helping people to move through a situation quickly, right? We've seen it work for like STDs. We've seen it work for tuberculosis. The other part of that tool is the way that that tool, and this is, gets back to what what General Dogon was saying, that it gets back to the ways that, like, at the end of the day, the city is never going to do anything other than continue to criminalize. It's going to continue to look for ways in order to make sure that its disinvestments, its disenfranchisements across so many different sectors and systems that its own science tells you need to be strong in order for the people to have a chance at some sort of quality life. It's going to continue to undermine all the ways that it wants to make that better by being so entrenched within a police state, by so believing in the ideas of anti-Black racism that you even constructed the category of a criminal, by being so invested in ideas of being like anti-Latinx and anti-Indigenous that you would even create the term illegal citizen and think that you have a right to say who should be here or not, right? And then also in the ways that if I'm thinking about, some of the work that I think the previous webinar you guys had, thinking about the ways that like anti-Muslim racism creates these category of terrorism, right? And then justifies like a US imperial project, right? I think, was it, I don't remember which of the panelists had brought up the Kerner Commission. And like, this really, the university that I'm at, Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science, right? Its history, it directly says, is a part of, like, this is what came out of the Watts uprising, right? These commissions happened. They said, why are all of these people in these urban cities across the United States so angry? Well, they're angry because they don't have this, and this. And when they are, as you say it, resilient, and think of ways to like organize around the fact that they don't have this, and this, then you make all that organizing also criminal and illegal, right? So that, this was why everybody was so angry in all the urban centers. But what came out of it was, well, if we give them universities, if we focus on the idea that they need hospitals, right, and where they're at, if we give them opportunities to be represented in these places that historically have marginalized them, if we essentially desegregate a little bit, right? If we desegregate a little bit, then they will, all this stuff is going to go away. So I think from, just sitting back, I always appreciate General Dogon's like importance of like keeping us hopeful, right? And saying that, okay, we're here to have these conversations, we're thinking about this, and people are fighting and resisting right now. But, as a professor, right, as somebody who has been a part of the coalition, who believes that these solutions of contact tracing, who believes that, we have entrenched ourselves in a way of practicing public health that makes it so difficult to imagine what we would do without surveillance, right? We're getting back to the Eurocentric idea that we're so caught up in that we can't even see another way out, right? That we rather put all this money in testing these technologies on animals, right? And then going through all this complicated process and all these resources versus simply giving people a place to live, right? Like, I feel as if we're not going to come up with anything that's going to be super fantastic for all the organizing and all the movement work. We're more in a place where we have to be activated and be like almost like structured into doing the work that movement needs. And so, yeah, I hope I'm, answering the question, but I'm going between hopeful and also going between the like, it's business as usual.
No, thank you. I think that we all need to have that reality check as well. So what we're going to do right now is to invite folks on the webinar to share their thoughts, and of course we want to come back to our panelists as well about like from their own locations and vantage points, what does that organizing look like? But please feel free to either post your comment or raise your hand or ask a question. Maybe we do have a comment that on contact tracing. And I also want to just make sure that I'm not putting Professor Amani on the spot about contact tracing, because obviously it impacts everybody. So anybody's welcome to comment or speak to that. The comment is that my guess on contact tracing is that the contractors who made it will use it to refine tech that would later be repackaged as part of decarceration tech meant to monitor and track people on parole. So in a sense, like, just the whole idea of contact tracing, that technology to be flipped around, where now, this whole movement around decarceration and release and all of that, it's almost like when we're using these ankle monitors. So anybody has any thoughts about this comment, as how do they see this technology moving?
You know, I apologize because I should have, when you were asking me about like contact tracing, I mean, it itself is its own topic, and it's one that we've been like thinking a lot about, right, in our organizing over the last year. The science of it is good in some places, but the science of it in this context right now doesn't justify the relationships that are being built in order for us to see if this could be effective, right? Meaning that the private and public cross like sector science and what are we, you know, we're talking about biotech, right? Like relationships, like all this, all these movements that are being made to come up with a technological data heavy solution to contact tracing, right? They're all putting us at risk. And this is for sure true because we've seen this throughout the entire pandemic, that we have, you know, hit a certain place in the organizing around abolition where the solutions that we're talking about a reform are solutions that are about like creating risk profiles, risk assessments, doing data-driven policing, doing data-driven like prosecution, data-driven, data-informed, predictive like analytics, like all their solutions of reform from community pushback and, you know, demands for decarceration are being met with like these solutions that really are locking people up in their house, right? Or structuring their lives in such a way that it will put, you know, other opportunities at risk. So in order for that system to justify itself, it says it needs data. And so when we're talking about here now public health surveillance, and we're talking about contact tracing, and we're talking about, you know, thinking about ways of testing out a tool in the middle of a pandemic that we don't know will be effective or not in this context. And by in this context, I mean that like looking outside of just the whole like box of thinking about, you know, stopping disease, that understanding that stopping disease is one part of an entire social and political landscape, right? Like the whole point in any intervention is not to just focus on the disease, but to say, hey, I want to, you know, intervene in a way that we increase like the quality of life for human beings, right? Like that evidence is not there. We don't know what the impact of this intervention is. So then it doesn't then justify these other relationships that are being built with these other companies who need data in order to be able to justify, right, what they're doing in these other sectors around thinking about like more innovative ways of locking people up in their home and denying people freedom. You know, and I'm sorry, you know, it takes me a little bit, you know, to like come full circle and to explain that. And so much of that is because we've been learning it together, right, over the last couple of months. You know, because on the one hand, we want solutions that will stop this, right? But on the other hand, we don't want solutions that are going to stop this, that are going to undermine us in other movement. And so this is the tension that we have with contact tracing.
I think that's a great you know, context for us to continue and build our conversation on. So, any other comments from folks who have not been? Please raise your hand. Okay, so let me just open it up. Where did Audrey go? There you are. So, okay. Go ahead, Audrey, if you can unmute. Go ahead.
I've heard people, you know, General Dogon and Pastor Cue and you know, leadership say, you know, that I think there's a recognition that really what the government wants, and you know, just I think getting the Olympics in 2028 plays into this. You know, they want to banish the houses. They don't want to solve the problem. They don't want to save their lives. They want to keep them safe. They want, you know, I think some secretly welcome these evictions that are going to come, that makes the problem even more unsolvable, unmanageable. And you know, and the obvious thing is there's people who have answers. There's people who can help, you know, help the funds go to the right places, the people who have answers. And yet I saw a motion being submitted today in City Council by Corette's, Council Member Corette saying, because the LA Times exposed how expensive these pallet homes are, they want to issue a study. They want to find different solutions than pallet homes. Well, LA can, why don't they go to sources where the answers are, where people have lived experience and research and knowledge that can help us out of this quagmire. And instead, they will just continue to study the problem and come up with worthless solutions that just further criminalize and keep people unsafe. And it's just tragic.
Mm-hmm. Other comments, other questions? Okay, so yes, please go ahead, Sasha, because I was actually going to come circle back to you for you and Chris. So please go ahead.
Earlier, there was a conversation about what was the response to us and our action, and a lot of the response, like someone had said, that was we had got some negative from the neighbors who had their own ideas of what was going on, and for whatever reason, but also like just from people in office, our response, we had Kevin De Leon, who he kind of spoke before he should have, and even though he seemed sympathetic towards the situation, he still spoke before he should have, and just giving empty promises to us, and that was the response was, empty promises. We've been working on getting a temporary stay until we can have until there's a solution for these houses, but and the solution that we're providing is the El Sereno Community Land Trust, and that'd be run by the people and in El Sereno for to govern these homes, and not just to govern them, but like the name is reclaim and rebuild our community. So we also want to rebuild them. We want to make them. They say that they're inhabitable, but I was in one of them, and I mean they are habitable. There might be might need a smoke detector, and then all of a sudden it'll be habitable compared to them saying it's not. But the community, we've come together and we've had an agreement to fix these homes, and to the government, you've had these homes for over half a century. You've had time to figure out something with these homes and to better the community with them, and you failed. So now, the people are trying to step up and take that responsibility and take action. And that's exactly what we did. And we were met with, force. No, that's not what we want. So we're going to violently take you guys out of these houses. And that was the response we got, and it was just on so many levels. It just keeps on failing from, the people in office, Newsom, he's been quiet. Dorazo, we've tried to get in contact with her office because she made false statements about the action, and she's been quiet. She's not returning our calls. She's not returning our emails. Just, people who, Kevin De Leon, he had someone and he said he was gonna get his vouchers. He passed the baton to someone. They passed the baton to someone, but that person, when they passed the baton, didn't transfer all the information. So now here we're still 3 weeks later living in our cars. Luckily, those of us who need the place, our community came together and got the money for them, but silence has been the response, if anything from them. And that's, that's heartbreaking. Like me, myself, right now, I'm in a motel room with my son and, my family, because the group came together and did that. Otherwise we'd be sleeping in our car, and like, that's, the government again. And today, we've been calling to the people who we're supposed to be calling to try to figure out, hey, when are we going to get these vouchers, this help from this, the system that's not trying to help us. And as they call us today, I'm calling someone from PATH and the program manager, and she doesn't return my call. So I called her again. So then when she returned my call, I had missed her call when I tried calling her back, but then finally someone from PATH had called me. So it's just like this runaround game. And then finally, because I'm calling you, you're calling me. Like, you guys were supposed to help us out 3 weeks ago, but you've been silent. Like, and that's the response. They think that if they're just quiet, I guess we'll just go away, but we're not.
So that, Chris, just I think someone just brought up about these pallet homes and this whole this wastage that was exposed, that they're spending $130,000 on an 8x8 home. But yet at the same time, you have these 400 vacant homes. So in a sense, with all of this expose going on, because I want to move this conversation into strategies. And of course, sometimes we don't want to talk about strategies very openly as well, because there's so many different strategies at play. But just in general around as an organizing strategy, how are you all sort of building that base, and that which is very powerful to begin with, as the next stage of this fight?
Right. Well, right now we're in the process of critical analysis and just kind of evaluating what has happened in a very quick manner. We're also organizing because there is legislation that um, has been introduced by the district representative Durazo. Okay. And part of that is, it's called SB 52, if I'm not mistaken. It was originally known as SB 9. And this legislation, if it passes, is going to completely sabotage any opportunity for a land trust, among many other challenges. But it's basically a El Sereno centric legislation, which there's a lot of things problematic with this legislation. And so our main kind of analysis of it is that it takes out the opportunity for any community control over these homes, these vacant homes, and it takes away the possibility of creating a land trust. And so we have to engage in this way with the state to prevent this legislation from going through, because our long-term goal of providing a community-based with the broad-based coalition response to this issue. This is the longest this is the longest land dispute in the history of the US, the 710 corridor. And so the communities involved, the coalitions that are behind what initially was the base of support that prevented the expansion of the 710 freeway through this corridor, is the same base of support that is behind this reclaiming of homes. And so there's a long trajectory, and it's still not enough, because this legislation is going to need to be killed, and we're going to ask for support from different coalitions across the city, and at the same time recognizing the need for us to also connect and support those movements as well. So it's mutual aid. We know it's a term that's getting thrown around a lot, but I mean, this is what the fashion that we've been organizing for a very long time already, and so we understand what that means. But in terms of strategy, that is a very open strategy that we have, because it's something that involves legislation, and it's like a main focus right now.
Okay.
We would also, we are also discussing the need to do this with a forum like this with other housing rights movements, to continue this kind of reflection and coalition building, because we're understanding that, as the other comrades here have shared, that this next year it's going to get turned up, and yeah, that's what I can share right now. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Pastor Q, wanted to build on that. So here, what I mean, it came to me when Chris was talking about this thing, and Sasha shared the what's been going on. So in a way, the community is providing solutions, right? And then not only, and the community is providing solutions because the system has excluded the community forever. So now the solution is very clear that let's keep on building together, and let's kind of just have what we've always talked about, local ownership or local participation. But then it is further being legislated to continue to exclude the community. So it's almost like a double-handed, just whammy that we are seeing, which we saw in a sense again this year in our fight as well, around abolition and defunding. That not only was the facade of $150 million defunding was thrown at us, but it's being recircled back to the Los Angeles Police Department through various other programs like Community Safety Partnership and this, that, and the other, which would further criminalize the community. And then on top of that, they get a $106 million increase this year for the next coming year for the budget is what they're asking. And here's the kicker, that LAPD just conducted its own survey through the Loyola Marymount University, LMU, and they released the results on the 8th of December, in which very categorically 37% of the respondents demanded that the LAPD be defunded. Now, that's a large number. That's when you look at, and this is LMU kind of claiming that this is representative of the city, this is scientifically done, okay? So you have 4.2 million people living in the city of Los Angeles. 37 million come to about 1.6 million or something are saying that we want the damn thing defunded. But again, so circling back, so what is our plan and what is our pushback and how are we organizing and building that resistance around that?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things we're doing as it relates to housing, by the way, we've got to build, one of the things we've got to do is we've got to put structures in place to replace what we're abolishing, right? I said that earlier. It is important because if we don't, then they're going to continue to try to justify their own structures, right? So we've got to put structures in place ourselves. And that's part of what we're doing when we reclaim our homes, right? We are on the phone and we are on a thread right now with Philly, right? Reclaim Our Homes in Philly. They have taken about 30 homes. And then we are on the phone with Moms for Housing in Oakland, right? And so what we're doing is we're building not just a local strategy and not just a state strategy, but we also got to build a nationwide strategy. And so that's the nucleus of and the beginning of that strategy that we're trying to build in order to continue to fight back. Because as we're defunding, we need to invest, we need to divest and invest. And these are the things we need to invest into. We can't just divest or we can't just defund and then have them do the okie doke and return those resources in a different program in a different way. No, we've got to have the programs that actually absorb the abolitionist type programs that actually absorb those resources. And I think it's important for us to build that as we're building strategies to abolish. We've got to know what we want and how we want to build it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So with that in mind, Dogon, how, just the stuff that's been going on in Skid Row, where clearly, the community, there's a big old bullseye on the community constantly. What are some of the various strategies or organizing that you yourself are a part of and have been building that power?
Okay, cool. So I think Q, he hit it. He nailed it all. I would add a couple of things to it. So one thing that we have been doing in the community, we've been doing for the last 15 years, and one way of taking back your community is to most definitely build a community watch team. You know what I'm saying? That's what we did in 2005. We built a community watch team, which we used to fight back and take our community back from the gentrifiers, right? The business improvement district, the private security guards riding around on their bicycles with the little colored t-shirts. Y'all seen them. They got these t-shirts called themselves the community ambassadors and all that stuff. But anyway, I don't want to get into too much about them. But we ended up taking our community back, from them. We ended up taking our community back from police, ended up taking our community back, from the city, which is all in the same, boot together. They all support gentrification. In fact, LAPD is the gentrifiers police, right? That's what they do. They work for the gentrifiers. And so do Shitty Hawk. All your council members, that's who they work for. They work for the other side of the table, the side with all the the steaks and the gravy and the lamb chops and all that shit. They work for that side of the table. They don't work for us, right? Because we ain't got shit to offer of them. You know what I'm saying? But hey, you need to give up some of that shit that you got, right? And so the name of the game is to stay in the streets. You know what I'm saying? That's why another part of what Pastor Q say. Once we get in the streets, just like, you know, with the Floyds, you know what I'm saying? We showed a great example with the Floyd rebellion, right? How people took it to the streets, right? First thing the city do, they start locking it down. We look at downtown, you know, it's still halfway all boarded up, right? Just a few months ago, they just now started. Just a month ago, they just started to take the boards down, but they put them back up again, and they were scared that what was going to happen if Trump was going to win. You know what I mean? But because they knew we was going to take it to the streets, right? So they scared of taking it to the streets. You know what I mean? I'm gonna tell you, every time that we take it to the streets, you know what I mean, we win. Right? Every time we take it to the streets and we stay in the streets, we win. What's the first thing? As soon as we took it to the streets, national, around the world, everybody starts singing the same song. Defund the police, fuck the police, abolish the police. That's all you start hearing people talking about, right? And so even the mayor came out talking about, well, you know, I take 150 million, you know what I'm saying? I mean, they, you know, took 150 million, that, you know, from the pigs here. That was because we was in the damn streets, right? And then what happened when about a month after, you know, we studied rallying, staying in the streets, you know, what happens after we leave the streets? It goes back to the regular program. That's why the city just putting out new motions right now. I was looking for the motion right now on the floor about restarting up the sweeps and all this shit. You know what I mean? They wasn't gonna do no sweeps when we was in the street, you know, right? But now that we out the streets, now they want to get in the streets and do sweeps, you know, right? So that was the motion that Buster Cano, Kokurian, and Mitchell and all them, you know what I'm saying? And they just approved it. They voted on it and approved it. You know what I'm saying? And so it's time for us to stay in the streets, and we ain't getting back out the streets this time until we get what we want. You know what I'm saying? Because once you get out the streets, it's over with. So just following up and piggying back on what Pastor Q was talking about, you know what I'm saying? The only thing I would just have to add is we need to, you know, just like I would say, create a community watch team for us to go out and document, you know, the civil and human rights violations that's happening in our community, because they are happening. Document all the technology that LAPD is using, you know, all that data, document all that shit, where it's at, who they're using again, watch their ass, you know, like they watch us, you know. And then just, you know, build community up. We got to build power in our community. We a sleeping giant. You know what I mean? Shit, this is what? 10,000 police and 4 million Angelinos in the city of Los Angeles. How the hell are we losing? So all I got to say.
Yeah, I think I want to add to what General Dogon is saying. He's right on. When you think about Garcetti trying to fail forward, right, had his sights on Biden's cabinet. Not that we're praising anything about Biden's cabinet, but it's a movement. It's about the moving pieces. They're playing chess, right? So it's about those moving pieces. And BLM being at his house for the past 21 days, right? I was there yesterday. We've been at his house for the past 21 days, and he hasn't got appointed to any, definitely not to HUD, because we don't want him to bring his crazy strategies and his housing strategies on a national level, right? So generally, we'd be happy to let somebody like that go and say, well, at least we get rid of him. Well, we don't really get rid of him if he's setting national policy, right? And so for us, those little victories of just maneuvering until we get to abolition, there's some things we need to do until we get to abolition, right? Right now, getting rid of Lacey, right? Getting rid of Lacey, and now the new DA is getting rid of the death penalty and all of that other stuff, right? This is all stuff that we want. We know they're gonna give us a little and then take back a little. So General Dogon is right. We got to stay in the street. We got to keep the pressure up. The other thing we got to do is we got to make sure that folks understand identity politics don't trump justice, for lack of a better word. You can't, and that's why we got rid of Jackie Lacey. Folks know that we're serious. And the type of folks who are going to, our people, get in bed with folks like that and who want to uphold this white supremacist system, they need to fear us as well.
Absolutely. So going to you, Bita, just talking about it, where the primary lane for the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition is information sharing and surveillance. And here we have looking at public health, and what in essence, all this conversation is pointing towards that having a massive, massive public health crisis all across. I mean, the emotional trauma, the physical violence, the displacement, the insecurity, the constant banishment, the constant violence of the police. But yet at the same time, within that, and not within that, but just how this culture of resistance remains extremely strong. How constantly, where people continue to build together. But in that, the main how surveillance and information gets weaponized, how people are being traced and tracked. And now we have this whole new system, not a new system, but many added layers to a pre-existing system of public health, which has no end in sight. Because, I mean, given the ecological disaster, this pandemic is not the last one that we are seeing.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
So how do you see that as somebody who's in the thick of these things, as a way that what is your call to action from that vantage point?
I think that we are going to continue to do what Pastor Q was saying, take a little bit from here and then like re-put it in here. And by re-putting it in here, they're going to make relationships with the same people that we were trying to take their money from to begin with, right? All the people that are going to be major players in any sort of pandemic prevention, both in dealing with what's going on right now and then thinking about what to do moving into the future. All of the solutions are about more data, more technologies, more tracking, right? And so but we're in a place where we know that every single one of those things results in people dying, and specifically Black, Indigenous, Latinx, right? People of color dying. That's exactly what all those solutions, those are roads that lead us down to this place. So for me in the profession, on the one hand, we have the tension of understanding that policing is a public health issue, and it's wonderful that we can get that, but we still don't understand who the police work for. We still don't understand that part. We just that seems to be really missing. So I think that the call for those in our field is to really look at not the police officers, the bad apples, how do we make them better? Community policing is to really push away from that and instead to see who do they work for. And as General Dogon said, they work for the gentrifiers, right? And then, there's the need to really push us as a profession to understand, well, who do our systems work for? Who does the public health system work for? And that's when he was talking about loved it, the lamb chops and all that stuff that made me so hungry, right? The dinners that are not $2 signs, $3 signs. We're talking about the 4, the 5, the dollar signs, right? That are so large that they're kind of incomprehensible to us. We don't even understand how that kind of power works and operates. We need in public health a proper power analysis, right? When we look at Black Lives Matter LA and we look at the people's budget and we look at these systems, for us in public health, it starts to get us to rethink okay, well then where do we need to focus our energies? What does a real intervention look like? And that's really important. But what we're still missing as part of that power analysis is to understand how the very things that we're saying are bad for our health are not unintentionally there. It's not an accident. It's not random. So it's holding a certain supremacy in place. And what is that, right? What is that civilizational hold that it has, that what happens in LA determines what happens in Berlin, that determines what happens, right? In Palestine, all over the world, what are these different parts that when something is happening here, it affects everywhere else. Everywhere else is coming back and affecting here. This is not random. And so the public health piece of it needs to continue to have, to be pushed, to have a proper power analysis, to understand how systems are working and understand how they're working intentionally in this way. This is about disciplining. This is about punishing. This is about taking and maintaining control. And I think anything that gets them to get out of addressing that is the place where we're vulnerable for all the reforms that we've been talking about,
Mhm,
across the
mhm,
last hour.
That's right. Right on.
mhm.
Right on.
Right on. So one comment we have, Chela, would you like to just share that, or go ahead and unmute? Or I can read it.
Hey everyone. Okay. I mean, y'all, I was listening. Everyone's doing amazing. Hey Pastor Q. Hey Dogon.
Hey,
Hey everybody.
how you doing?
So let's be real. Okay,
Go
so
ahead.
I posted, we are also missing how health intersects with class, gender, and sexuality, aka trans people, gender nonconforming people, especially sex workers. How especially when you're trans and you're GNC and a person of color or you're undocumented, you are forced into doing sex work. And so you're also like, when it comes to like COVID, and when it comes to the coronavirus and when it comes to housing, we are blocked from these systems. And so thinking around those things, thinking around the violences that happen in particular to trans women of color, and more in particular trans Black women, and just thinking of like what it actually means when like health organizations start pulling defunding, when they start pulling funding, because that's what's been going on with a lot of HIV and AIDS, institutes and shit like that. They've been pulling funding, and so it's been really hard. A lot of like trans Black folks and trans and queer undocumented folks are like struggling real hardcore. And so like those are very, like Pastor Q said, it goes after the most marginalized of us. And I also want to put disability in that, folks who are disabled. Skid Row has one of the highest populations of folks who are dealing with disability, whether it be mental disabilities or physical disabilities. So yeah, thank y'all.
Thank you,
Thank
Chela.
you.
Bita, any thoughts on that about rooting that in through a public health lens?
Yeah, I mean, every single moment in like public health history, like where it's kind of tried to do some interventions, like or work on things, like after the fact, it always comes back and it says, well, we didn't really do like this situation justice when it comes to looking at issues of class, gender, and sexuality, right? Like all the things that Chela was saying. Like after a fact, it's always like, okay, well, we missed this and there were missed opportunities. And then the reform in that then becomes to put like some money into the health disparities that we think impact that community the most, without really any real money that actually can improve the situation. Or the money that's put in there is money that is put into partnerships with, once again, biotech, right? Or pharmaceuticals, so that the investment in actually addressing the health of like what public health calls the gender and sexual minorities, right? Those that are most marginalized when it comes to our health outcomes, right? That instead of really doing anything substantive, if it does anything, it's like only at the end of the day, it indirectly benefits the very same people that we're saying don't serve the people, and doesn't do anything long term. But I think Chela, the point that you made around like sex workers, like as you were bringing up that point, it really it's striking how like the essential worker conversation doesn't include them, right? And then on top of that, when you think about just in the history of HIV prevention and what is called the porn industry, right? Like and all that, right? Like that, it always hit like a barrier there because it didn't want to think of sex workers as workers. Like even as it changed the language and created a whole new category and one that's supposed to be more just, right, more equity minded, it still can't deal with like, why did you make that category? Like what was that about that you wanted to recognize sex as work and then talk about the social and political context and make that kind of work essential, right? So all that is completely missed right now during the pandemic as well. And it's a part of like the larger, like not appreciating, essential workers and what that has meant, as Pastor Q was saying, for like the people who have been the most vulnerable because of their works, because they're they're in risk environments, not that they themselves are at risk, right? That they're in environments that are, at risk. So yeah, I think that that's extremely important. And probably as, in like 10 years from now or 5 years from now, or just right now tonight, somebody's writing about how we've like missed the boat audit and we should have done it, as if it's all past tense, right? And then the solution that will come forward will be one that is ultimately predictable, unless we continue to like, which, you know, the conversation on structural racism is a conversation that I never use the word without thinking about all the other axes, right, of oppression that are intersecting, because they're extremely important, right? And, you know, I think right now we're, you know, trying to connect for both people that have, you know, for people here in the United States who have been here, and also for the people who have newly come, right? If we think about our new immigrants, like helping them to understand the role of anti-Black racism in this country, have made the need for us to get out structural racism and to like foreground this, but it can't come at the sacrifice of like all the other ways that we know that, you know, oppression is manifesting.
So which then, just building on that, Sasha or Chris, or both, you know, just one of the things, obviously, is this whole politics of lip service. And along with this politics of lip services, that how that politics of lip service very slowly and in a very methodical way, because it's all intentional, invisibilizes people. And rather, I would, you know, just borrow that term, making them invisible, that they're visible when they're what the powers want them to be, and they're invisible when they don't want them to be. So in a sense, you know, what we heard from you was like, you know, this move with this bill, that is going to further take away any responses that the community has and the power that the community is building, which further the whole, I think in a way, the resetting is that how do we further disempower the community? How do we further, you know, continue that claim, that state power that continue to exclude? So what has been the sort of the analysis and the organizing around that as well? That the underlying one is like the direct assault, but then the long-term sort of repercussions as how the system is resetting to further exclude and marginalize in the long run.
So the bill has been introduced, but nothing has been passed, and SB 9 was luckily shut down. But like Chris said earlier, you know, this bill now centralizes Sereno itself, which, you know, as a minority community, versus the whole 710 corridor, which is a long stretch. It's all the way from Sereno to Pasadena. So you have, you know, a huge land there, and it's just us that they're focusing on not being able to have this. And that's because, you know, this response came from after our actions. So, you know, they see that we're really serious about what we're doing because they've already been in contact with the land trust for them. So they already knew that this was something that we were wanting to do. And now that they see their action, that, you know, we're serious about this, they want to stop us and stop, yes, just stop us. And you know, hopefully this bill will get shut down. You know, again, it was Maria Durazo who did, you know, bring this bill and forward. And, you know, we've been trying to contact with her, but they just don't want to hear it. And we're invisible to her, we're invisible to them, as you said, because if they can find a better way to shut us down before we even continue, you know, that's what they're going to do. And then we don't have, to proceed in their mind with what we're going through. But, you know, it just saddens me because, like I said, mentioned earlier, you know, you've had over 50 years to figure a situation out for this. And clearly this is an issue, you know, to the point where it's not like, you know, I or any of the other reclaimers woke up one day and were like, hey, listen, I'm gonna take this house because why not? You know, this was a need, and a need that we're trying to solve, not just for us, but for other families. You know, we came together as a group and not just for the 20 of us, like, you know, there's all these other houses that are still available that, you know, we would love to just help people. There's so, you know, and they're just gonna shut us down because, I mean, you know, we're the minorities. We don't, you know, we're people of color. We, you know, don't have a lot of money, and so therefore we don't exist.
Chris, you want to add to that? Thank you, Sasha. Chris or anybody else who's one of the reclaimers or folks organizing in El Sereno, please feel free.
I mean, I'd like to lift up one thing about that, about the reclaiming in Sereno, right? We know that the freeway is symbolic, right? Because I say freeways are the arteries of racism that runs through America, right? They carry the blood of racism. And the fact that Pasadena had the political power to prevent them from building that 710 freeway through Pasadena. But other communities of color, West Adams, the 10 freeway, displacing Black communities, they couldn't do that, right? And the homes that they took through eminent domain, which is the homes in El Sereno that the reclaimers are attempting to reclaim, that they took through eminent domain, remained even after the freeway could not move forward. So the people in Pasadena had the political power and the political juice to prevent them from building that freeway. And now they're trying to stop people from reclaiming the homes that they took. And again, you see the system at play, right? And so when fighting them, we've got to bring all of that to the table, right? You've got to bring all of that to the table in our strategy.
Absolutely, absolutely. I saw why. If you, oh, Sasha, were you going to say something? Because I saw why I've unmuted their mic, so if they wanted to make a comment.
Yeah. Just on that topic, not only they're not allowing us to be in these homes, but they're paying, 1 to 2 officers to, be outside of this home. The state police, the Caltrans, is paying CHP to stand outside these homes. So not only are they letting us not be sheltered in place, like Newsom told us to do, but they're spending our tax dollars on the CHP to sit there and protect these empty buildings. That that's just another point just to bring out there. Like,
absolutely.
You would rather spend their their time on this, and that blows my mind.
Why would you like to make a comment, please?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to bring up also the fact, well, 2 points. One, I'm thankful that Chela brought up the fact that, like capitalism and these systems impact certain communities more so than others. And I think, like earlier I had mentioned some of the harmful things that the neighbors were saying. And one of them was also, like just checking online and seeing the comments from certain community folks. One of the things that they emphasized was, well, you're lazy and get to work, right? Calling reclaimers lazy without really trying to understand or hear us out. And I think that also just like highlighting the fact that not everyone is able to produce under capitalist society, and the value that we place on productivity, and who does that exclude, right? I think that that's an important part of this conversation. And the second piece is, the state benefits from criminalizing our communities because they need prisoners to be able to get quote unquote free labor, right? And that cycle, there's, I think it was like 62 people that were charged. And so I think that that part of the conversation is important because the state uses taxpayer money to incarcerate our community, and then they benefit financially, they make profit off of our community going into the prison pipeline. And that system, that structure, it's functioning well, it's functioning the way it was meant to function. And so I mentioned this in the previous conversation I think we had, but I say it again, like our enemy is 500 years old, and it knows how to play the system because it created the system, right? And so this idea that it's not broken, it's operating the way it has always meant to.
Thank you. But Chela just posted a comment that I saw this meme. It said, capitalism says produce or die. Corona says stay home or die. The government says die. Absolutely. But just Thank you, Chela, for sharing that. So Dogon, what just coming back to just knowing our fight, what we are seeing over here is that, I mean, this is as intersectional as it gets. Because we are looking at issues around housing, we're looking at issues around poverty, we're looking at issues around ability or disability, we're looking around issues of race, we're looking around issues of just homelessness, we're looking around issues of state violence, we're looking around issues of migration. Um, so in a sense, I mean, this is one of the things for the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, that in order to fight, we've got to know our fight. And I think that's what Pastor Q reminded us just now as well, like, that it is not about dumbing down. It is about people's analysis. It's about our grassroots research. It's about our understanding, because folks are going through their lived experiences. So Dogon, talk about, like, how are you sort of, in that at LA Can, and being in Skid Row and being on the front lines, how are you envisioning our fight unfolding in 21 or continuing? I mean, nothing new, but where do we, what is it, what does that layer look like? Unless we lost Dogon. Well, we'll pass it on to somebody else. So, well, this before I go to any of the other panelists, anybody else wants to chime in? Maybe one of the other organizers, X, or anybody else? How do we see this deeply intersectional conversation that we're having, our fight unfolding?
I don't know if X or Y are on, but I do have a response to that. I think that, like, at the beginning of COVID, and maybe even before also, right? But this slogan, like, we take care of each other, has been brought up constantly. And I think that's honestly where the answer lies. We are engaging in the politics of refusal. We're saying, we have never consented to this, and reclaiming homes and these abandoned homes is a part of that. And so I think that, like, we have proven time and time again that we will continue to defend ourselves, and the state will continue to defend property, and that fight is going to continue for as long as it has to. But we're here to ensure that each and every one of us has shelter, has food, has access to education, healthcare, all of these things that would make our quality of life better, and they have refused to provide for us. We take care of each other, and we will continue to do just that.
Thank you. Thank you. X, I saw you unmute. So do you all still want to make that comment?
Hey everyone. Yeah, I'm X, she, her pronouns. I was one of the reclaimers from this last take, our OC, Rebuild and Reclaim Our Communities. And I just kind of wanted to share a little bit about my experience on the night of that's taking. We were met with a lot of police violence. I was arrested along with other folks. We're trying to get the charges dropped, but we're still in the process of doing that, and haven't really heard back from any public officials. So that night of the arrest, there was a lot of violence from California Highway Patrol. Myself, I was pushed to the ground, or thrown, I should say, to the ground by California Highway Patrol. I had several bruises on my body. My hair was pulled. I think my nose might be broken. I actually tried to schedule an appointment with a doctor. And a few of the organizers were, they contracted COVID. Something that I experienced as someone who was arrested was that some of the California Highway Patrol officers didn't have their masks, and when they were asked to put their masks on, they were aggressive towards folks. They would get really close to your face. So I ended up testing positive 5 days later. And a lot of us, like, we live in a pretty tight space where we live with our other family members, and it's really difficult to quarantine when you don't have enough space. So that's something that like I've like been working through right now. Yeah, we're trying to just apply pressure right now to our public officials that the homes be transferred into land trusts. We need a lot of public pressure to be able to do this. And just like on how to move forward, I'm gonna share a link where folks can sign a petition or share the link so that way folks can help either raise funds on PayPal or GoFundMe, follow on Twitter or Instagram, and repost if possible. And I think that's all. But yeah, I think we're gonna continue to fight, and we just taking a little break because we do want to move forward with like being cautious of COVID-19 affecting our families and our communities. And so we're trying to just find a way to move forward with that. Thank you.
Of course, and wishing you, good health and safety, and absolutely, but also, just thank you for, yeah, I just amazing. So I think for the last few minutes that we have, I think it'll be good to kind of just get a sense from folks as to, just as we are talking about, maybe starting off with Dogon, that what we heard just now, Dogon, was a lot of different ways that the system is coming at you, but we also heard that how many different ways we are just hitting back at the system, and how people are organizing in their own spaces as well. And so this truly, I mean, we theorize intersectional movement building, but this is, putting it into practice. This is about, and I think going back to what Y was saying, that no, I mean, we ain't into any politics of respectability. We are into politics of refusal. We don't consent. And not only we don't consent, we will fight you, hand to hand. We'll fight you, and we'll be there. We're suited up. So talk about, like, just how do you see somebody who's been, in the fight, in the trenches, on so many different levels for some time. How do you see this unfolding, and what are some of the ways that we continue building this intersectional power? Just as we are having this discussion.
So yeah, thank you. So most definitely, for me, I think it's gonna get a hell of a lot worse before it get better. The conditions people see right now ain't nothing. Right, 2021, they're gonna triple up. Right, you can see them down the street coming. And so most definitely, I tell people right now to get involved. Most definitely, you have to get involved. You gotta sign up, join up, body up. You gotta do all those ups right now. Right, and getting involved with, like, one of the first steps would be joining the coalition. Right, get involved in the fight. It's real basic. Just like they say. Together we stand, divided we fall. I'm gonna put it that way here, right? So I mean, we got power in numbers. So we gotta come together first thing. And once we come together, we gotta take it to the streets. And I mean, everything else gonna come. I don't think people can too much predict, understand me, the course of what's gonna happen. Who was said that, the police, killing my brother Floyd would lead to even protests in Japan, right? So you don't even know where it's gonna go to or what is gonna happen. But what we sure that we must do and gotta do is stand up and fight back. We gotta come together. We gotta join. That's the basics. We gotta come together. We gotta join. Hands. We gotta get involved with coalitions, stuff like that, right? And then we gotta start the fight back. And from there, hey, let the goes where it goes. And so I mean that's the basics. So I don't want to get too much into it. Answer the question because. You know, it's fight back one-on-one. You know, stand up. You know, get involved. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Pastor Cue.
Yeah, I think it's important, definitely saying absolutely to what General Dogon just shared. I think solidarity, intersectionality, building power is important, right? We know organizing is important, but the example for me is, as we continue to organize, we have to see our victories, right? And we gotta learn from our own victories, not just from those in the past, but we've got to learn from our own victories. Look at the BLM did not become the largest movement in U.S. history for social justice or for racial justice by accident. Right, the organizing was going on since 2013. Because when people got to the street, they needed a slogan. They needed something to say, right? What did they choose to say, right? They chose to use BLM's slogan, right? BLM didn't tell them to do this, right? This is how the spirit moved. We got to understand that our movement is not just physical, it's also spiritual, right? Our ancestors showed us that. Harriet Tubman felt she heard from God when she took 13 trips. Right, we know Denmark Vesey, who led a rebellion, felt he heard from God, right? And so, whatever your spiritual tradition is, we know that we're not alone. Our Creator is with us. But I believe if we continue to organize, we will be ready for the moment, right? If we weren't organizing, we would not be ready for the George Floyd moment. But we were organizing, and so we were ready for the George Floyd moment. And we were ready for that movement to take us to where the spirit of the movement was taking us. So I think we got to continue to organize. We're planning to organize, and we've got to be specific in that. In organizing, we've got to focus on the most marginalized, like we said, the LGBTQ folks. We got to focus on the fact that Black folks are, because of anti-Blackness, are naturally left out of the system, the natural way the system works, right? Because of anti-Blackness. So we've got to continue to work around those things. So I think it's important as we move forward for us to be specific in our organizing, for us to continue to build, and for us to continue to say, identifying me in the system or putting somebody who looks like me in the system is not enough. You have to put somebody like me in the system who understands that the system is trying to destroy me. And that person trying to destroy that system. So, yeah.
Thank you. Bita?
I don't know, there was so much that was said earlier, and I feel like I'm still reacting, right? I want to see the trailer to General Dogon's like 2021. As he was speaking, I felt like I could feel the movement, and it was extremely hopeful. And then with what Pastor Q was saying about like, how does it have to, like, what are the places that are the traps, right? Like, let's not do these traps. Like, as we're like doing this movement, it just has me continuously reflecting then on what are the traps within both public health as an idea and public health as a practice, right? And then, in what ways do the partnerships with academic institutions make us stronger, and what ways do they also put us at risk? Right. So, these are the things that I think continue to concern me as we end 2020. We end 2020 and we're getting for 2021. And we're dealing with the same players, the 710 corridor expansion, Caltrans, environmental racism. Pastor Q was talking about them being arteries, right? Like, you think about like Long Beach, the ports, right? Like, what does that mean what happens to the rest of the world for those things to even get there? And then once they get there, what do then we do to the communities that we push them through to get to other places? Like all these things that like we knew were important before are still as important. And then there are these new things that we have not dealt with that are also here. And so like, this is the 2021 that I'm 2020, 2021 part that is, I'm really struggling with. How do we not get in the way of movement? How do we support movement? And do we even know enough about where we're going to be able to make really smart decisions right now? If we're trying to practice a public health that is like more in spirit with the community-based workers who are trying to support our existing community health system, and not in the vision of the public health that is about the bureaucracy, the institutions, and maintaining white supremacy, because white supremacy is what put it in place. So, you know, these are the things that like, you know, that I'm kind of, you know, ending this with. And I, once again, just really want to say, I go back and I listen to the webinars. You know, I teach at night, so I can't always be here at coalition meetings. But I think that the solidarity, the intersectionality, all of that has been lifted as the way forward. I see that in all the webinars, and I thank you guys for all the hard work that you're doing behind the, you know, behind the scenes, and to bring this here. So with partners like this and coalitions like this, like, you know, there's a lot of hope.
You're on.
Yeah, I was on mute, my bad. So I was just going to say, Sasha or Extra Y, if any closing comments that you may have.
Sasha, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I just have to, you know, agree with people when they say, you know, it's going to take solidarity. It's going to take everybody, you know, doing their part, and no one waiting for someone else to do it. You know, we all need to take it to the streets, and that's absolutely correct. We can't stop. And, you know, I know right now it's a scary time because we have COVID, but, you know, at the end of the day, that's just making all the issues that we're fighting that much worse. And so that's why we have to take to the streets. We can't be scared to get out there and to do what's necessary to progress these movements, you know, be as safe as we can, but at the same time, yeah, you know, just stand together and take it to the streets.
Thank you. X or Y.
Yeah, I would like to close off by saying, you know, I've never had any doubt in the strength of our people. It has carried us on for this long, and it will continue to carry us on. And I agree wholeheartedly with what Pastor Q was saying. This fight is as much physical as it is spiritual. And so, you know, calling upon our ancestors, calling upon, you know, also like the future generations. This is a fight that it's bigger than us. And because of that, they can't stop it. And I think that power, you know, it's not to romanticize or to glamorize our oppression or, you know, like the struggles that we have, but it's to recognize that, you know, there, in spite of all the systemic oppression that we may face, have faced, are facing, we are still here. And, you know, there's a long journey ahead of us, but yeah, there's so much power in our people.
Thank you. X, do you have any closing comment? Okay. Well, folks, just quickly want to make a quick announcement that there is a Chella. Do you want to make that announcement? Go ahead and unmute.
Speaking of housing, we are coming together this Friday at 7 to protest outside of Mitchell Farrell's office in Echo Park. We're using the Queer as Fuck demonstration practice called Vogue. We have a ball that we're throwing outside of his office, and it's going to be at 7 o'clock. We call it FTP, Cancel the Rent Ball. There's a flyer. I sent it to Hamid. It's this Friday at 7 o'clock. It will also be streamed for those who are trying to stay home. If y'all have a home, no talk. It'll be streamed on my platform on Facebook. But for those who want to come out, it is social distance. So like wear your mask, wear your gloves, bring sanitizer, but also be prepared because we're going to call Mitchell Farrell's ass out. He's the council member for a district. I forgot which one. Silver Lake Echo Park area. Forgot the number though. And he claims to be pro-LGBT, but he kicks out homeless people. So we are calling him the fuck out. And yeah, there y'all go. Remember, it's this Friday at 7 o'clock. Please be there.
Thank you, Chella. Thank you. And then there are other, Chella has posted the JPEG of the flyer in there too. So please get to open it up. And then also real quickly, you know, one of the urgent actions that is happening at the coalition as well is that LAPD is looking to now fully legitimize facial recognition technology and asking to have a policy set up. We absolutely reject that. You just can't change it. You can't reform it. You can't make it better. So this has to be dismantled. So I posted a link in there where they're asking for, the commission is asking for public comments. Of course, it's a rubber stamp useless commission, but hey, you know, let's put them on the spot and expose them. They're rubber stamping. So the deadline for that is December 22nd. It's all set up for people to click and send. So please send your comment, and then also the website for reclaiming our homes is also posted as well for folks. So thank you again very much. I mean, I really, really, really appreciate the conversation, appreciate the depth of the conversation. But I think what was really phenomenal was that this conversation is both rooted in amazing community-based intellect, analysis, but action and on the ground lived experiences. So I think it doesn't make more powerful than that, that it's not just one or the other. Even the way the conversation is, that what we are bringing, that our being is so deeply intersectional, not just in our action, but our thought as well. So thank you again. Amazing, amazing conversation. Our next webinar will be the last one for the year, which is next Tuesday, the 22nd, which will be webinar part 40. It goes on. That we'll be closing the year with, of course, with data-driven policing and where surveillance and all this stuff is moving and where is it going. So thank you all very much. We will be looking forward to seeing you all next Tuesday. So be safe and be healthy.
Thank
Thanks
you
a
all.
lot. Thank you.
Love.
Take care, everyone.